This situation continues to have a devastating impact on a number of industries, and travel is most certainly one of them. But one day it will be over, although the travel industry, of course, might look very different by this point. So for this reason, we're going to be beginning today with a session by futurologist James Wallman, who will explore what travel experiences might look like in the future as we emerge from the COVID-19 crisis. We'll then move on to our New Horizons session as a panel of aviation experts examine the devastating impact the coronavirus pandemic has had on the sector and how airlines and airports are adapting to the crisis. We'll have a short half-hour break at 3:30 before we return at 4 with a session exploring the new legal landscape with top advice for businesses needing to get their own houses in order, ready for when those bookings do return. And we'll conclude today with a session dedicated to the issue of refunds, which continues to dominate the industry, and how the sector can move forwards and ensure they have the trust of consumers. Before we begin today, we have introduced a new element to today's seminar. To help us as a business to continue providing online seminar content such as this, we are asking delegates to consider making a donation to attend today's event. We'll donate 20% of all contributions to NHS charities together to support staff and volunteers who are working so hard to care for COVID-19 patients during these challenging times. If you do wish to make a contribution, please do visit ttgmedia.com/contribution, and a huge thank you to those who do so. Just a few other housekeeping bits. As before, the seminars have all been pre-recorded, but they do all feature up-to-the-minute advice. We've made sure that they are as relevant as they possibly can be. But we are going to be conducting, as before, the live Q&As after each session with all of the panelists. So please can I ask you all to use the Q&A function, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen, rather than the chat function to ask your questions. For those of you who are fans of Twitter, we always welcome any social media love. Please feel free to use the hashtag #TTGSeminar or the One Travel Industry hashtag. And as ever, we will be making these sessions available afterwards. It will likely be Monday because of the bank holiday. Please do keep an eye on ttgmedia.com after the event. And of course, we really do value your feedback. We'll be sending out a survey again after today's event, so please do let us know your thoughts. Right, it's time now to go to our first session of the afternoon. COVID-19 has changed our lives in ways we could never have imagined just a few months ago. As we emerge from this crisis, the world is likely to be a very different place. But what does this mean for the travel industry? Futurologist James Wallman explains how the sector will change and what firms need to do now to ensure they're ready for the new world.
Hello everybody, how are you? I hope you're well and is enjoying working from home with kids and stuff, the right thing. So I think it's sort of, just before doing this, I've had to make sure my kids are at the back of the house and my wife really has them in lockdown, so they understand they are not to come upstairs and bang on the door and come in and demand that I come and play with them or whatever. I imagine you're going through the same thing. It's a real honour to be here today. I've been working in travel since the 90s when I first left university. I worked for Thompson Holidays and Crystal Holidays, and so when Sophie came to me last week and said, would I like to, use my skills as a futurist to give my view of the future? Of course, I said, yes, I will do that. So I've had some real fun connecting with people I know in the travel industry and in other places and thinking about what's going to happen next. Okay, so this is my view on traveling in a new world, what the new normal of travel will look like. And if your view of the future is basically just informed by other people and just like, oh, this person said this, this publication said this, I saw this on the BBC, whatever, then all you're going to do is be a follower. And I think if you want to have something to say in those meetings, and if you want to create a better product and you want to connect with the right customers at the right time and help rebuild travel, I think the best way to do that is to be a leader and to have your own views. So hopefully I'm going to provide some tools to do that. So we'll start with the problem, then I'll talk about the answer. The answer, by the way, is a question. You'll see that. Why listen to me? Why am I here in the first place? Like I say, I don't think you should listen to me. I think you should need to have your own view of the future. I'm going to throw in some travel trends. I'll talk about how I've come up with those and then look at some key questions. So the problem, of course, the problem is coronavirus, right? And the fact they're all stuck at home. No one can even leave their home, let alone get on a boat or a plane and go somewhere. But one of the problems with doing a piece on, what the future of travel is that predictions are always wrong, just like models. It's just a question of how wrong they are. But predictions are particularly wrong during a crisis. And there's lots of people, probably like me, you're in different WhatsApp groups. And I seem to be, there's one of my WhatsApp groups is like travel writers and authors, and they're all kind of like drinking quite a lot. And then another group I'm with, very political and connected kind of columnists and sort of quite important people at the World Economic Forum and stuff. And they're really excited about how things might change and how this is the great opportunity for change. But if you look at previous pandemics and problems, things tend to kind of come back to where they were. Now, of course, things change. And this is an opportunity for some changes to be accelerated. But so the kind of predictions of, the idea that Greta Thunberg will get her way and we'll all be super eco after this is a lovely idea, but I'm not sure if that's true. So then also, what kind of future are we looking at? Are we talking about just after lockdown, once this entire lockdown thing stops? Are we talking about pre-vaccine, post-vaccine? Let's be real, there isn't a definite situation where there will be a vaccine. You've probably come across the letter-shaped forecast. McKinsey was really early with those, with the kind of U, the V, the W, the L shape. And from what we're seeing in China, it looks like L shape is more realistic. Those things are fun, but they're just, I'm not sure how exactly useful they are. And then think about the travel industry. Sure, that matters. But what really matters is your sector or the sectors that you work in, because this will be a bumpy ride to the future, and some will do well and some will do badly. And what really is key is how adaptable you are. This is a lovely quote from a guy who was the mayor of Chicago. Never let a serious crisis go to waste. It's an opportunity to do things you think you couldn't do before. So let's not let the coronavirus as a huge problem go to waste. What can you do that's going to be different, that's going to make you more robust and adaptable in the future? Okay, so the answer, I almost want to do a drum roll here, but don't get too disappointed, because the answer is a question. The question is, how might we? How might we get people traveling with us again? And if I was you watching this, I'd be like, oh, thanks, that's not an answer. But the answer is the how might we. This is something that was developed at Stanford University. It's used by companies like IDEO, the design firm. And this is about design thinking. How might we is a wonderful way to phrase any problem that you ever have. The how means there is a solution, it makes you feel positive. The might means you can kind of play with ideas. And we makes it collaborative. Because if you say, how can we, you suddenly think about things you can't do. And obviously the challenge is to rebuild the travel industry piece by piece. Okay, so why bother listening to me? Very briefly, I've been a forecaster and innovator since 2004. I wrote this book called Stuffication, originally self-published in 2013, about how we're moving from materialism to what I call experientialism. Instead of looking for happiness, identity, and status in stuff, we're finding those things in experiences instead. And my firm works with lots of different clients, from Avis to Visa. I'm now a sector specialist at the Department for International Trade, specializing in the experience economy. I work with a number of different travel clients, from pioneers like Black Tomato and Brown and Hudson, to bigger firms like Kayak and Marriott's Design Hotels. I wrote this book, Time and How to Spend It. The FT very kindly named it one of the books of the year last year. And this fits very nicely with Stuffication. So Stuffication was not stuff, experiences instead. And this is how to spend your time, how to choose experiences that are more likely to make you happy and successful in life. What's really interesting about this is that if you think about that from a personal perspective, you can flip the ideas and use exactly the same set of ideas. And there's 7 rules, 7 principles that you can use to design somebody's experiences too. Hence, I've been working with lots of experience-led firms. Okay, but I don't want you to listen to me. I want you to have your own view of the future. So I'm going to explain how I figure out what's going to come next and why that's useful. So my work is inspired by, and it's based on something called the diffusion of innovations, which explains how ideas take off. So ideas from the take up of microwave ovens to foreign holidays to skateboards follow this curve. It's called the diffusion of innovations. There's an S curve. and it's codified in 1962. What happens is you get a bunch of people who do things first. They're called the innovators. They're the crazies. They're the they're the people that have given up an iPhone to have a Xiaomi phone or some sort of, they're the people that went to Bhutan first. They're the people who will do the crazy thing, who were into hip hop back in the 70s and the early 80s. Then you get the early adopters. This is when ideas start to really take off. And then, as you can see, early majority, late majority, and laggards. The work that I do, I've been doing since 2004, is I look at what the innovators and early adopters are doing today to forecast what everyone else is going to be doing in the future. And the thing is, it's worth pointing this out, most ideas don't take off. The Sinclair C5 is a fantastic example. Google Glass is another one. But when they do, you can figure out what's going to happen. I'm going to show you this thing called the future canvas that will help you think about the difference between the innovations that are going to take off and the ones that aren't. And once you understand that, you can influence that takeoff curve. So in terms of obesity is a really good example. Now we know obesity is coming, we can try and get rid of it. But if you see something taking off, let's think about, we want the innovators and the early adopters of the, let's call it the new travel in 2019, 2020 and 2021, post-lockdown to go travel faster. You can start to influence that curve as well. And let's face it, if we think of travel at the moment at the kind of 0 point at the far left of this with nothing happening, it will come back and it will follow one of these S curves. And what we all want to do is for the travel industry, for our particular sector, and for our individual firms, we want that curve to be as steep as possible. So understanding who your innovator and who your early adopter customers are, I think is going to be critical, because if you can get those guys to get traveling again at the right time, of course, when it's appropriate, the others will follow. So if we can figure out if an innovation is going to take off, you need to consider two things. The seed and the soil is the way I think about this. The seed is the innovation. Some of you may have been doing more gardening since you've been stuck at home. It certainly seems to be a thing where I am. My local pub is now selling plants to keep themselves going. Quite adaptable, quite impressive actually. If you think about when a seed goes into ground, if it's a good seed and it's rich alluvial soil and it's well watered, it's likely to grow. A really good seed, but in dry, sandy soil won't grow. At the same time, great soil on its own with no seed, nothing will happen. So it's really, I think, useful to think about the innovation as the seed. You can ask 5 questions and then think about the macro environment as the soil. And there are 10 questions to ask about the soil. I'm just pausing. Is this pace okay?
Oh, perfect. Yeah, it's really good. I'm really enjoying it.
Okay, great. Okay, so the 5 questions to ask of the seed. As I think I might have mentioned, this was codified in 1962. It's been applied more than 5,000 times, and this stuff works. It's how I've been forecasting since 2004. I'm making a reasonable career out of it, so it must kind of work. But I like this way of thinking about this quite simply. Is this innovation better? Is it easy to try? Is it compatible with how we do things now? Think about something being non-deviant. Is it observable? Will people see you doing it? Is it simple to understand? Think about Boris bikes as a fantastic example. Yes, they're a better way of getting around London. Let's think, pre-lockdown, of course. Is it easy to try? Yes, you put your card in, you jump on one. Is it compatible? Yeah, people move from one place to another and they need to get there quickly, plus we all understand cycling. Is it observable? Think about the times that you've seen a group of 4 or 5 friends on a Friday night or Saturday or something, and they look like they're having fun. You see them doing it. Is it simple to understand? Yes, it's a bike you can use. You can think about masks in this way. Face masks are really interesting. We'll come to that in a moment. And then you need to think about the soil. And these 10 questions, they're based from work first conducted at the RAND Corporation in the 60s. And I put them, as you can see, into these 2 ideas of steeple and dust. I've added the dust, by the way, on the right-hand side, demographics, aesthetics, and science. Demographics are super important, I think, in a world of urbanization. Demographics, when you're thinking about your innovations, you might want to think about your specific customers as well. Aesthetics has been left out of the RAND Corporation's thinking, and most firms forget about that. You can include user experience if you're designing a product as well. And science strikes me as something that just, especially think about COVID-19, but also think about the work that I've done in terms of stuffication and time and how to spend it. And you know, if I'm going to, which I have done, forecast that we're moving from material goods to experiences, one of the key things that's helped drive that is the science that shows that experiences will make you happier than stuff. I feel like I'm whipping through this, but I'm going to continue. So what I wanted to do is show you, I've created this canvas where you can bring your ideas together and show somebody else why you believe something is going to happen. So you think about the seed as the because and the soil as dust steeple. You'll see there's a seed where it says because, there's a steeple where kind of church thing, and the submarine is because of a U-boat. There's the great German movie Dust Boat, so it's dust steeple. That helps me remember it anyway. But this keeps it really simple. One of the important things here, and I was having a great chat with friend of mine, Sarah Wilson, at Accor the other day, and we were disagreeing fundamentally about something interesting about how the future of travel is going to look. And the usefulness of this future canvas is that instead of just disagreeing about opinions, I think this is going to happen, I think that is going to happen, you're able to surface your assumptions, and then you can have a reasonable conversation. And if you do disagree, at the very least, you can say, okay, we disagree because, you think this is better, but I don't think so. Or I think the science supports my view, you don't think it does. Or I think the technology is there, or the politics, the laws that are coming and whatever. So this is a really ugly slide, so forgive me, but this is quite a practical way of doing this in a digital format. There is a paper-based version you can use as well, but this is quite practical. I found this useful to share things with people in a digital way, which is obviously useful now we're all working from home. So I'm going to run through a couple of examples, and then we'll get into some travel trends. So this was a few weeks ago. No, it's about a month ago now. I was thinking, okay, face masks. What do I think about face masks? So, you know, are they going to take off? Aren't they going to take off? So I started by thinking about them from a C perspective, this innovation. Of course, they've been around in, Asian people have used them for quite some time, but they've not really taken off here. So let's think about them. Are they better, easy to try, compatible, etc.? So, okay, are they better? Yes, they stop coronavirus spreading. But actually, back in 7th of April, when I first started looking at this, the data on that seemed to be a little bit spotty, to be frank. There seem suggestions there with these air droplets, etc. But I think one of the things that's better, and it's really worth thinking about this, is what does better mean? Cheaper can be better for some people. Showing status is really important for everybody. So better can be specifically relevant for your target demographic. It's relevant in different ways. So better is one of those kind of quite interesting, like it's a qualitative point, of course. But I think one of the things about wearing a mask now is it shows status in that you care about others. You think about this, the way that we talk about key workers now as being heroes, and the clap for carers on a Thursday night. Showing that you care about others, I think, is really important. Are they easy to try? Well, you just get one and put one on, or you can make one at home. Are they compatible with how we do things now? I think no, and that's one of the reasons why they haven't taken off previously. You look like you're, slightly abnormal, but actually that's obviously changed dramatically in the past month. But also it's an accessory. We all understand the idea of accessories. And interestingly, I posted this, I think, on a Friday, and somebody in one of the WhatsApp groups I'm in posted something, I shared this over the weekend, that showed that fashion companies are doing this. And it actually, there's a company called Embark in New York, who I may mention later in the presentation, who are working with Fretta, the Italian firm, to create masks for hotels. It strikes me as a really obvious thing for a travel firm to make a face mask for people, because this is a way to connect with people right now and show that we care. But also, the future of travel is going to require us to wear face masks. Okay, flipping forward, let's look at what's going on in the soil here. Okay, so legally, interesting, I think, that the UK has not made it mandatory. In some countries, it is mandatory to wear a mask when you're out. The science is really interesting on this. So there's a paper that was in the magazine Nature that shows that people are most infectious in the first week after catching COVID-19, And I think that's when you don't show in other ways too. So one of the weird and interesting things about this thing, of course, is that you don't show the symptoms for some time, and of course you'll catch, you can pass it on during that time. I've seen some other data since I posted this thing about the future of face masks that shows very clearly that face masks really, really drastically reduce the chances of you passing on COVID-19 and reduce the R number, so stop it spreading. So to me, they're going to be really important. So therefore, having gone through this process of the seed and the soil, I can confidently say face masks will be a really important part of our society and of travel. That probably sounds really obvious now. A month ago when I was looking at this, it wasn't quite so obvious. I'm going to skip this one about immunity passports and health certificates because of time. Travel trends. Okay, so testing time. So this is, I think, really interesting. Emirates is doing these rapid tests where you get the results in 10 minutes. Wow. I've got some real skepticism around these kind of ideas at the moment because, testing does it show up immediately if you've got it? But I think this is the kind of thing that we're going to have to look at. I think this next idea is fascinating. Thermal imaging. This is the Hostelería de España with an idea. We are seeing lots of smart travel firms doing smart stuff because, of course, people are concerned about this. The new hygiene factor, people have talked about this forever. That, who's talked about hygiene? Hygiene is expected, but this is going to be the new hygiene factor. People will be talking about this significantly in the probably next 6 to 12 months or so. Singapore has this SG clean stamp. Accra has jumped onto this very quickly. I think one of the interesting things here is what this may do to a firm like Airbnb, because if you think about it, one of the things that we love brands for is trust. And when you stay in a hotel, you're going to have a trust that they've gone through the process. I think what Accra have done working with this organization, Bureau Veritas, that has been in the cleanliness and inspection business since 1828, there's a real sense of trust. These people know what they're doing. This is going to be, disinfected on a regular basis. There's not going to be COVID-19 that we're going to catch when we're here. What's that going to mean for smaller chains? Well, they're going to have to play catch up very, very quickly. Robots don't carry diseases. This is amazing at Hong Kong Airport, this robot that sterilizes virtually everything in 10 minutes. Fantastic. iPassports, this came out of my work looking at health certificates. One of the things that people sort of said to me here is that people won't accept this, this kind of invasion into our privacy. But you look at the reaction in France to having to take out a document saying why they are leaving the home, either a printed version or a self-certificated app. Almost no problems from Paris to I know some people in the south of France, and people just accepted this. And I think this idea of having a immunity passport, health certificates makes sense. One of the interesting things here, so the EU wants this to happen, but there seems to be a slight, we really are in an evolving world. So making predictions at the moment is super hard, partly because of the fact that, so on the one hand, there's this idea that you should get and let's call it an passport for the sake of argument, an immunity passport, COVID-19 passport. So sometimes they want you to get one of these that shows that you've had COVID-19. Now, as we all know, there are a couple of different strains. So if you've had one, maybe you haven't got the other, but also we don't yet know if you've had it. Are you not going to get it again? Or there could be, a health certificate says that you haven't had it. You don't present any of the antibodies that suggest that you've had it, which is, to me, it's just watch this space on this stuff. I think this is going to have to be there, but we need the science to support them. The idea of preferred partners with New Zealand, Australia, suggesting they're going to have this, the Anzac bubble, if you like, I think is really interesting. Interesting that other countries are looking to do this too. Austria, Greece, really interested, especially for the Southern European countries for whom tourism is so important to their economies. They are desperate to get somebody in. But not everybody's up for this. The Germans have refused this in particular. Staycations are going to be an important point. Domestic travel, we've seen in China, domestic travel has taken off quicker, obviously, that makes sense. This is a picture of my family. my two kids, my wife, and the dog. You can see in the corner there, going to Richmond Park. It's not very far from where we live. And it's great when you're there because you're free, this huge space, 2,500 acres. But the tension point, of course, is the bottleneck. It's getting through that gate in the first point. So you have these kind of queues of people doing their 2 meter wait. And of course, I'm bringing this up because you think about what that means for airlines and airports and the pictures that surfaced the other day about people on Aer Lingus flights. We're going to look at some weird and wacky solutions to that. I don't think I'd be a futurist if I didn't suggest something about virtual travel. I love virtual travel. It's super exciting. I'm not going to play the video for reasons of time. It's worth looking at these guys called Supernatural, based in Los Angeles. It's the idea that you can do, you know, don't just do the work, Joe Wicks workout. You can do a workout somewhere else. This is really exciting and interesting, but it's still not the same as travel. It's its own thing. I think it will sit alongside. Video didn't kill the radio. Radio has gone up and up and up. This will sit alongside travel. But you don't need to do virtual travel in a super techie way. This is really about bringing what's out there to the person, to connect, to keep them connected to the destination, to keep them connected to your firm. So these guys in Bark in New York had Michelin-starred chef cooking lessons. They had a virtual safari. They did indoor Olympics. Social distancing, that lovely phrase that nobody knew until a couple of months ago. There's some wild, wacky ideas. This to me looks like the death of the beach. It just looks horrific. This from Air Asia is, to me, it's the opposite of inviting. That said, a friend of mine the other day said, how are we going to solve this? He said, easy, Michael O'Leary is going to offer flights at £1 and people will put up with it. I think much more likely as kind of our travel PPE. That's not a very realistic one. This is much more realistic. I love this. This is Fit's, a firm in the States. I think we're going to see much bigger glasses. There's my fashion tip for the future. But these guys do custom fit eyewear. You can do it with your app, and it actually is protective. I think we're going to see people wearing big glasses, wearing masks, and then we'll put up with the airlines and flying. Okay, so key questions. First up, I'm very skeptical. I'm going to throw this out there. I'm very skeptical about attitudinal data. People love attitudinal data, but the truth is behavior is primary. Talk to, psychologists at universities, and you'll soon see that what really happens, if people do stuff, then they start to believe it too. People tend to believe what they do rather than do what they believe. And people still are planning to go on holiday. As you can see, this great COVID-19 tracker. People still think about taking a holiday, but as you can see, if you look at the numbers at the bottom, 85% think about taking a UK holiday. It was 81% in April, 78% in March. So that, this supports the idea of domestic travel. But this thing in Australia is interesting. Western Australia, they relaxed the rules from gatherings of 2 people to gatherings of 10, and the beaches were packed instantly. I think people can't wait to get out. I don't know how you feel. I think they also listen to what they're told. When they're told it's safe to go out, they will do it, and they'll do it in their droves. Think again about that diffusion of innovations curve and the innovators, the early adopters, and then running through that curve. Our key thing first is to get those innovators and early adopters traveling, because once the others see it safe, they will follow. Interesting learnings from China, of course. They closed first, they're reopening first. Looks like hotel occupancy is up to about 30%. It's domestic leisure travel, first of all. There is some business travel. The interesting bit, if you look at the bottom here, Golden Week, about 40% of last year. That's a huge number of people, 80 million people traveling versus 195 million in 2019. But I think that suggests quite strongly that what we'll see is obviously a return. And maybe by next year, things will be really positive. So what's going on in Europe? Is it going to be locals only? The French are still limited to a radius close to their homes. Spanish are talking about opening their beaches. Hopefully they won't put bleach over all their beaches like they did in Zara de los Atunes. The Greeks are very keen to open. I've seen from one analyst who says back to 2019 levels by 2022. So the key then is, can you hunker down and keep your business in hibernation and kind of building back up to full levels again in 2022? are the old trends relevant? I think absolutely. I was looking at a piece I did for my team put together for Kayak back in December last year, and we looked at Fluskam, this concern about the environment, AI being very important, friction-free. I think that's going to really take off because people won't want to have, wherever possible, you don't want to have to deal with the person who could breathe on you. Wellness is going to be super important. There's been one of the wins in this time of coronavirus has been concern about mental health. That's concern about loneliness and what it does to our mental health. I think we're going to see quiet escapes. The rise of time design is something I fundamentally believe in, about this growth of the experience economy, this growth of experiences. And this image here is an example of how you design time, design experiences, and use the hero's journey as a template. So I want to close with some key questions. And when we work in workshops, when we work with people, and then the best way to innovate and come up with ideas, to start with this kind of how might we. So how might we use our skills and contacts to actually help? I've seen, in fact, this is Embark. They flew in, they used their contacts with chartered flights. They flew in a bunch of equipment into the US to work with some of their clients. How do we identify who our customers are, who are our innovators and early adopters? And how can we think about connecting with those guys? How can we figure out the future for our sector? Obviously, research is key here. Use that diffusion of innovations, use that idea of the seed and the soil, and then mercilessly steal the best ideas and use those to create something that's right for you and your brand. How might we use this crisis to do things we wouldn't have done before? What is it, those things, if you think about this, what are those things that you really want to do, but you didn't have the time and it was business as usual, so why bother? How might we think about our role as time designers? Because the truth is, we will come through this time. There will be that weird post-lockdown time. There will be a period of kind of coming back again. But if you want to connect with those innovators and early adopters, those people who have got the money, the wherewithal, and the passion to travel first, those people tend to be more experimental. Those people are the people who are already on board with the importance of experiences that are inspiring and transformative. So just kind of going back to business as usual, if only if it was like that, just isn't really going to work. And the key question, of course, is how can we get people, or how might we get people traveling with us again? So my team and I would love to help you solve your challenges. We do this through reports and talks and workshops. If you like this deck, please send me an email. Very happy to share it with you. And if you want to know more about using that future canvas, again, very happy to share that with you.
Thank you very much to James for that session. I hope you all found that really interesting. Obviously, he can't predict the future, but really interesting to see his thoughts on what it might look like. James is now going to be joining us for the live Q&A part. He should be joining us shortly. There he is. I'm just going to unmute him. Welcome, James.
Hello. Hello, how are you, Sophie?
I'm good, thank you. I think there's a slight delay on your sound perhaps, but it's all fine. Just to all of our audience, we do have the Q&A function. If I can ask you all to use that rather than the chat to direct any of your questions you might have at James, and I'll put them all to him. Just to kickstart the conversation though, it was quite interesting you said about virtual travel sitting alongside normal travel. I know a few years ago, there were lots of people talking about VR might replace travel as it is, but I guess the lockdown has kind of emphasize, if anything, the need for people to get out and experience the world.
I was at a Skift conference probably about 5-6 years ago now in New York, and it was one of my early experiences of travel VR, and I think it was like Hamilton Island, or one of those really fancy 5-star islands off the northeast coast of Australia. I think that's where it is. And, I put on these goggles and it was amazing. I was in a helicopter. I was with this super hot girl swimming through, turtles and stuff. And it was amazing. And I'm one of these people who's quite vocal. And so by the time I took this thing off, there were like a whole bunch of people around me kind of going, who is this freak going mad? And the woman there who was, from the company said, wow, does that make you want to go there? And I just said, no, it makes me want to do more VR.
Okay.
It didn't inspire me about the destination. I know what swimming is. I know what sailing is. I know what the helicopter is. I just think these things will sit alongside. I mean, just imagine now if you had the choice to watch. I mean, wildlife programs are possibly slightly different, but just think of, yeah, you know, watching a program about lions. And I was in Uganda a few years ago for CNN, and it was only the third day that we actually saw some lions, and it was actually about 4 hours before I was leaving to go back to the capital. And it would have been hugely disappointing not to have seen lions, but when we saw them, they were real and they could have eaten me. It was very different to watching, you know, my you know, lovely TV with my kids.
Yeah.
VR has its place. It can be really inspiring. It won't replace. I can't imagine what the haptics would have to be like to make you want to do VR rather than the real thing.
Mm. And if anything, with the lockdown, people are just itching to get out and to go and see the world, aren't they? You know, we're seeing that with people wanting to visit parks and really enjoy their experiences more than ever.
Yeah, this is, I think, hugely positive for the travel industry because, of course, there's a huge amount of fear at the moment. And I was, you know, I've got a good friend who lives in Berlin, and he's like, wow, but everyone's coming out now. He's just bought a bike to get out so that he, you know, get out and do stuff. And a friend of mine in Australia who pointed out that stuff about Western Australia to me. You know, when you go from 2 people to 10 people and that suddenly fills the beaches, that tells you something about people. Now, I mean, it's worth pointing out, of course, we have the second highest number of, you know, deaths in the world. It's been you know, pretty awful, and it is. And there is definitely going to be certain sectors, which is why I threw in that stuff there about, depends on the sector that you're in. If your key market is, you know, older people, boomers, going on wonderful trips around Asia, thinking of my in-laws and my dad and his wife on some of the trips they've been on in the past few years, that's not going to be great for you. Maybe the key thing there is to think about, you know, let's play with the idea of preferred partners. So where is there no COVID-19? And maybe what you then do is you know, I'm playing here as you can tell, but, you know, maybe you charter the whole plane, or you charter the whole front, you know, the front of the plane plus 6 rows back. Yeah. You have people that are on some sort of, I don't know, you could do a crazy thing. We have 5 days, and for 5 days, they have to be in a you know, a locked environment. They get picked up from their home. And, you know, I'm just thinking of ways that you could move around this to get people traveling again. Because one of the challenges, and I'm fascinated by the, you know, the thermal imaging, the Turkish authorities, you know, demanding some sort of proof, is that if nothing shows up, if lots of people are asymptomatic and their temperature doesn't go up, then it doesn't really matter about the health certificate.
Yeah, that is the challenge. James, we do have some questions coming through, so I'm going to try and rattle through them. We've got someone from Anonymous. How do we identify innovators and early adopter customers, I think? That was back to your slide when you were explaining how to use the theories that you come up with. So they said, how do we identify innovators and early adopter customers?
Okay, so there's a real difference, and it's wonderful in the original Diffusion Innovations book that looks at the difference between, as you go through that from the innovators through to the laggards. So the innovators, and you know, the further to the left you go, the innovators and the early adopters, as opposed to the laggards and the majority. Innovators tend to be at the top of the socioeconomic pyramid. They tend to be richer, they tend to be in cities, they tend to travel more, they tend to read more. They also tend to be influenced by advertising. So if it was me, I would try and parse my the trips that I offer. I mean, you know, obviously this is different for different people who are on this. I'd parse the trips that I offer, and I would parse the kind of clients that we sell to. And I don't know, obviously it depends on how much information you have about them. So you might want to look at demographic or psychographic data. You might want to look at where they live, for example. And then I would try and connect with those people first. And you could do, you know, you could do simple kind of smoke screen tests. You could identify, I don't know, I'm just playing here as you can tell, but, you know, you try and find your beachhead market and find 50 people who you think, okay, these are among the wealthiest people that we sell to. They're going to tend to be younger, not necessarily. You can have innovators at all ages. And then go to them and say, we're thinking of doing this. What do you think of this way of moving things forward? When would you be up for it?
Okay. We've got another question. Which other industry could help the travel industry get back on its feet? Who can we learn from? That's quite an interesting one. Putting you on the spot there.
Yeah, retail. Retail is the obvious one, especially if you look at, Germany in terms of what's opening up now. Some bigger stores. I saw a wonderful piece of science that looked at the difference between shopping in small stores and bigger stores. And this was done by a guy who was an epidemiologist from MIT, now works at a startup over in the west coast of the States. And this is one of the reasons why I'm more convinced now about the importance of face masks. And obviously washing, disinfecting is really important. And what's kind of really interesting there was that if you go into a sort of, what they call in the States a mom and pop store, but your local store, you've got fewer people that have been in there compared to a larger store. And that reduces your likelihood of coming into contact with a droplet from somebody who's been, who's brought COVID-19 in dramatically. But if everybody wears a face mask and washes their hands and is conscious of that, it brings the likelihood down even in a major store. So the 2 meter distancing as well, actually 2 meter distancing and the face mask drop the chances of infection being carried from one person to another dramatically. So once you look at those numbers and you look at what retailers are doing, and obviously large retailers want people to, continue shopping, and, that means that the world is starting again. If you think about it, the idea of being allowed out more than once a day. I would look to retail and see how that, but there again, I think we're seeing that already. If you look at that work that Accor are doing, I think Marriott's work in terms of the kind of contactless, check-in is really inspiring. I think we're going to see robots doing more cleaning. That said, if you've got a person wearing a mask, that's going to help too.
Like that Hong Kong airport one. We've got an interesting one here. What do you think of the future of group travel? That's from Vivek. What does this mean for group travel?
It depends on the kind of group. 9 out of 10 people that are being killed by this are older. 9 out of 10 people have got these underlying health conditions. So if you were looking at, Intrepid or something, and you're appealing to sort of millennials are probably going to be fine anyway. They're the ones that are itching to get out already. I'm intrigued at sort of a company. This is Embark in New York. I think are really innovative, very entrepreneurial, who are looking at sort of taking a couple of villas together and going on kind of like 2-3 families together. Obviously that increases risk, but you can see the way they're doing it in Australia. So you go from you're not allowed to see other people outside of your household to, okay, you can see it can be 2 people you can gather, and now it's 10 people. So groups make a lot of sense. And if you think about it, and this is one of the funny things about travel anyway, I've got this theory that the design and all that stuff is about attracting the right kind of people. Because when you go down to breakfast and there are the people having breakfast in that room and you're like, you're not my people. There's another place where you go down at breakfast and there's all those people and you think, I'd like to talk to you at the bar later, kind of thing. Yeah. If you're in the right kind of place. And organized group travel where you feel that those people, you can trust them in some way. And let's face it, we all want to get back together again with our families and see our families. I think that's going to be interesting. I think people will be more up for it. Think about the fact as well that, people in multi-generational homes, they're going to want to travel together.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a nice positive answer. Andrew says, I guess moving this on a little bit, how do you see the impacts of COVID-19 having differing impacts on the classic package style holiday compared to the do-it-yourself Airbnb style holiday? Because I guess with this, the whole point is that you want someone to talk to if something happens. The travel agents have been working all hours around the clock trying to help all of their clients.
Yeah, I remember seeing Derek Jones's message on Twitter or something where he said, "We've got everybody home." I think there was a real satisfaction. I think, satisfaction. I think one of the things that he'd said was the satisfaction that the systems that they'd had in place to look after their guests had worked. That's what you would expect. But when things go wrong, you need to feel like you can trust somebody. So from that perspective, there's a real plus side on the package side of thing. Airbnb is really interesting. Let's say you're in a situation where you're wondering for a moment about the cleanliness of a place. Okay, and you're thinking, okay, am I going to go and stay in an Accor place where they teamed up with, this Bureau Veritas who've been around since 1828? Or are you going to go and stay in some Airbnb place who say they've cleaned it?
Really, yeah.
It's really interesting what that'll do. I think we need to trust things. I bet Airbnb, if they haven't released it already and I've missed it, will be working on something similar. But in terms of, one of the nice things about, I think there'll be road trips will be big. Obviously, domestic travel, you don't have to go through the tension.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, James, your sound's just disappeared. James, I'm not sure if you can hear us, but your sound has just totally gone. I know we had this problem yesterday a little bit. Can we bring you back in for one more question? Or no? Can you hear us? No? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh,
yeah, I can hear you. Sorry.
Well, do you know what? I am conscious of time. I know you shared your email address. Can we share that again for all the delegates to kind of perhaps see your presentation again? Or I know you said that they could view that if they emailed you.
Yeah, very happy to. I'll send the link. So very happy to share it. I think, obviously I've been working this for a while, but figuring out what to do and using that diffusion of innovations, that understanding of the soil. So when you, the seed in the soil, if you understand where you believe the world is going, and then you think, let's say you're in a virtual meeting with 10 of your colleagues or 5 of your colleagues or whatever, and you're saying, okay, is this any good as an idea? Is this going to fly? Is this going to help our business continue and survive so that we've actually got a product for summer 2021? You can look at it and say, okay, is it better? Does it tick the boxes? Is it going to make a difference? Is it compatible with how we do things now? And you can run through that because checklist, not to say, oh, it's no good or it's good, but to play that how might we game? Because everything is rescuable, everything you can make better. And the key is to kind of play that positive, creative game to create something that's more relevant for people today in the next few months as we slowly ease out of lockdown.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, James. I really appreciate that. And we are going to share your email address in the chat function as well.
Thanks,
James.
Good luck, everybody.
Thank
Interesting times.
Yeah, indeed.